dads need to be innovative. So I have become innovative, and I have termed a new term, which I am announcing to the world today. I didn't do any research, so it's possible somebody beat me to it. But term I'm introducing is double dad. I am a double dad. Now you're wondering what a double dad is, because you haven't heard this before. So a double dad is a dad who does a full tour of fatherhood, gets to the end, probably needs to have done a pretty good job, and then there's this pause, and then they get recalled to active duty. But they get promoted. They get promoted from dad to granddad. Granddad is absolutely grand. I highly recommend it as a gig. And we have some granddads here, right? Come on. Yeah, there we go. Got a few? Nice. Okay. It's the best. All right. Now, I can tell that the leadership team has placed some value on bringing a double dab up. And the reason I was sure of that is because they extended a full 3 minutes for me to talk today. And so I can tell they are highly valued. Now, I have enlisted another double dad. Where is he? Dean. Dean, there he is. Dean is going to keep me honest. He's going to keep me to my 3 minutes. And I'm going to be checking in with him to make sure we're good. All right? We good, Dean? So far, we're on track. Okay. So let's get to it. Now, when I was growing up as a dad, honestly, I thought I was doing a pretty good job. For the birth, our first birth, sorry, I'm one of those guys, our first birth, I was really, really prepared. I had everything laid out. I knew exactly what I was doing. Bradley method, people, if you're thinking about birthing, you got to use the Bradley method. Okay, talk to me later. But I was ready. But it all started to fall apart. It was time to go home from the hospital. It's like, my gosh, what am I doing? Well, I wish today, as a granddad, that I often have wished this. It'd be like, wouldn't it be amazing to go back and to parent from this amount of experience, throw some wisdom in there? It'd be amazing. It'd be a game changer. But it doesn't work like that because you accumulate these things and you can't just have them. It's about perspective, right? So it's less about whether you're doing a good job or not, or whether you're having successes or not, and it's more about realizing how great a father needs to be. And in those years of experience, I need to tell you that you're just not going to achieve the perfect dad. And I know some of you have said that in your head. I'm just going to be the perfect dad. It's not possible. Sorry. So don't try. Okay? Because a dad has failed a time or two, because we're always learning. So I've gotten older, and the more I see what dads need to be, the more I see that, then the more evident it is that God, our Father, is perfect for that role. And our earthly dads, us earthly dads, were but a dim reflection of that. And we can inspire, or we can hinder, can't we? We could hinder. We don't want to, but we could. And the question is, are we paying attention to what kind of a dad my children need? Because your children were given to you to parent. And God knew who you were, and He knows who your children were, and He chose this. And we need to be able to embrace that. So, firstly, a great dad, is a leader in his family. And a great dad leads by what? Leads by example, of course, a servant leader. Leading as a spiritual example for both our children and our wife to see. Then leading as a godly man for our sons to emulate, and for our sons to not just know how to be a man, right? But how to be a godly man. And then we're living as a godly man for our daughters to experience what a godly man sounds like, looks like, behaves like, so that we set into motion future relationships for our daughters to have with men. And you don't want to mix these things up. Don't get confused. Sons are not daughters. Daughters are not sons. And the firstborn is not the secondborn. You have to keep them straight. Children aren't widgets. Sorry, they're not coming off the assembly line, and they're all identical. They're highly individualized. And our job is to pay attention to all of that and to meet their needs. When we think about the Bible verse, train up your child in the way that they should go towards righteousness, we are not talking about a program. It doesn't work that way. So while I'm training and raising my son, right, in the way that he needs to be raised, my daughter's paying attention, and she's paying attention to how I'm doing that. And then my son is paying attention to how I'm training and raising my daughter. And then they're all watching how I treat their mother. There's a lot of watching going on. And whatever you do, I got to tell you this, whatever you do, don't run over their mother's foot. Don't do that. It's a bad idea, because if you do that while you're backing out of a tight parking spot, you're not going to hear the end of it. It won't go away. It's in the past, but not really. Now, growing up as a dad, an early dad, right, I created lots of ideas and programs, and I was being innovative even then, right? And had them ready to go. And then what happened? I lived my life as a dad. And I lived it and experientially found out, yep, values, they're not really taught, they're caught. Values are caught. And you can say that, but to live it is totally another thing. Everyone is watching to see what you're doing. Why is he doing that? Is that something I should do? I think I should be doing that. They're paying attention. It's a lot of pressure. And it's very humbling to be watched all the time as a dad, isn't it? Which is probably the next thing we need to get to. Dean, how are we doing? Excellent. All right. Okay, the next thing we need to pay attention to is that a great dad is a humble dad. It's a humble leader. Is being humble easy? Well, no. Of course, being humble is not easy. Especially if you don't have patience and compassion. So a humble dad is one that's full of patience and compassion. And a dad and a leader that's accepting that there are mistakes that are made, that's part of growth and maturity, right? In others, but also in himself, in dad. When my middle brother and I were growing up, was in New Hampshire on a mountain. We're in elementary school. It was amazing. We did a lot of snowboarding. We didn't do snowboarding. We did snow skiing because that's what was going on then. Nobody knew what snowboarding was because remember, I'm a boomer. Snow skiing because we could walk to the ski area. It was right on the top of the mountain. So I can hear to this day, I can hear my dad saying, if you're not falling enough while you're skiing, you're probably not learning something new. Oh, so we were thinking we should brag because we're not falling down, but actually we're not pushing ourselves enough. We're not testing the limits. We're not making mistakes so we can learn from them. Dad was right. He was right. That to learn and to grow requires making mistakes. And this is what all of our children are doing. They're making mistakes. They're testing limits. They're finding out what works and what doesn't work, right? And they're doing that all in their developmental path to adulthood. Now, a humble father not only accepts mistakes, but remember, admits them within himself, right? So within myself, right, as a double dad, What does that involve? Openly apologizing when you're wrong or when you're wronging others, and making amends so that you're repairing relationships. So what did I do? I immediately got out of the car and asked my wife, "Are you okay?" And I was horrified that I'd run over her foot. So sorry. And I apologized profusely, because that's what you do. And my kids, to this day, they use this as an example of how they know that their dad loves their mom, because I ran over her foot. No. because I took responsibility, right? That's why, because I took responsibility. So a humble servant, leader, father leads by example. An example of how to be humble, how to apologize, how to make amends and take responsibility for our mistakes, and then how to learn from our mistakes, right? Look in the rearview mirror. That's what you got to do. All right. Now, I got to say this little thing. It's kind of sidebar. Don't let me catch you thinking or trying to be perfect, right? Because being a perfect father is not going to happen, and you're going to just get an earful from me. And I have a title for a great future book. You ready? More innovation. Perfection, the myth, the curse. Because being a perfectionist is a curse. Let's look at 1 Peter 5:5. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Why? Why does he do that? Because pride attempts to take on a role that is not ours to take on. Nor do we have the capacity for such a role. Our role is not God's role. Good thing, right, dads? It's not God's role. God is the perfect father. And our role is to be a dad who points. A dad who points to God the Father as the sufficient and the perfect father. Now, I had so many plans, I couldn't enact all of them. I couldn't implement all the plans that I had. But in raising my kids, not to be perfect, because we've eliminated that, but to be really, well-rounded, right? Do you want to know how I did? Right? Do you want to know how I found out how I did? Yeah? What do you think? No? Yeah? You want to find out?
Yes, please.
Somebody wrote a book. Let's see. Rick Terletsky wrote this book. It contains interesting things, somehow, about me. So we're just going to read a little bit from this book that my son wrote. When we are young, our image of God is filled with characteristics of our earthly father, whether they are men of God or not. Either way, characteristics of God are solidified even incorrectly. A funny thing, though, when thinking about the image of God, God always seems to look a lot like Dad. For me, God always had a salt and pepper beard, because that's what my dad had. This can be reversed. Some of God's omnipotent traits can be placed on Dad. This is the same reason we assume our dads are all-knowing, believe that they can do no wrong, and are perfect. Of course they are. Because we are told that that's who God is. God must have big muscles. Well, sure, like my dad. The two can get confused. So is there no limit to what my dad can lift? A young child can take these characteristics too literally. The line between the two, God and Dad, have blurred together in many ways, taking on traits of each other. So when the moment arrives when we address what our subconscious has been feeding us, that God is just like Dad, it is not that far-fetched for us to come to the conclusion that, well, if Dad's not perfect, which he clearly isn't, then God isn't perfect either? Despite the level of the damage, our relationship with God needs some attention and some work. So I get to this part and I'm like, all that effort and work, and we've got damaged relationship with God. This isn't going so well. All right, we fast forward to the end of that chapter. This requires a little setup. So the background for this chapter is a trip up to Angel's Rest that I took Rick up when he was in high school. And this book, he's reflecting on that time and that period in his life, right? And so, those of you who don't know, Angel's Rest, it's in the Columbia River Gorge. It's gorgeous. It's this pinnacle. It's like a peninsula just jutting out there, and you just see the whole gorge. You can see over to Portland. It's wonderful. It's majestic. So here we are. We're there at the pinnacle. I could tell that he, that's me, was discovering something for the first time. He was learning something about his Maker. He was expanding his relationship with God. What it was, I'll never know. His face betrayed whatever childish impressions I had remaining. My outlook of who my dad was and how I compared him and God transformed in that moment. My dad, like any child, he was still growing. Not in inches, but in experiencing his Lord and the majesty of God in his creation. Leaving behind my childish thinking, my dad failed to be my God, but later he inspired me to mirror my Lord as he did. That's humbling, and I am so very grateful. Dean, how we doing for time? Okay, I got one more point. A great dad is just a dad. He's just a dad. You live out being dad. You show up. You show up from day to day to year for the whole time being you, showing up as dad. You continue to grow in your relationship with your Father, and if you don't have one, with your Heavenly Father, you start now, because it's never too late. Being a servant leader means being a parent that sees the big picture. And what is the big picture? That our children aren't widgets. They have individualized needs, and we need to meet their needs. We need to be able to sacrifice to meet the needs of our children. That's being a parent, and that's being a dad. To sacrifice for this life and for eternity. We do this by doing what? By being present in all authenticity. Present physically, present mentally, and especially present emotionally. Yeah, we're making that connection. A connection we identify as attachment. Very important. We were built for attachment. God made us for attachment. Attachment to Him and attachment to each other. Because when we are showing up, what we're showing up for is to be in the relationship with our children. To be the dad to our son or to our daughter, to our firstborn or secondborn, in a fully activated, intimate relationship for the whole time. To be a great dad, we need to be fully present and fully engaged in relationship. First with God our Father in heaven, and then with our child throughout their entire developmental journey.